Welcome to Wild and Exposed, your number one adventure, nature, and outdoor photography podcast. Wild and Exposed is hosted by Mike Mauro, Ron Hayes, and Jason Loftus. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to another episode of Wild and Exposed. This week, your hosts are Jason Loftus, coming to us from Utah, Michael Mauro from Colorado. I'm Mark Raycroft from Ontario, Canada, and today's special guest is Greg Piper from Northern Virginia. Well, actually, Pittsburgh. Are you in Pittsburgh?
No, I'm in Northern Virginia. Yeah, I was born and raised in
Pittsburgh. Right on. A very talented photographer. If you look him up on Instagram, you will be truly impressed with the breadth of his portfolio and the variety of subject matter he covers. And we look forward to learning more and hearing more from Greg today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
So we start these out always with and I don't know if you've listened to these podcasts before, but we always want to know what the most favorite experiences that you've had in the woods or out with you in the water, in the woods. What's that one thing that and it's really hard, right? Because we've all done a lot of stuff and it's hard to encapsulate one thing, but what's that one thing that just sticks out in your mind when someone says, what do you do? And you tell them a story?
Well, I tell you, man, I got a lot of great bear stories from up in Alaska, but hands down, my favorite, most memorable moment was underwater. I was in Raja Ampat in Indonesia on a dive site close to Mosul, and it's famous for these mantas, right? But we get in, and there's like no mantas at all. So I always try to stay by myself because, I don't really like being with groups of people underwater. They tend to chase things off. So the group went around side this dive site, and this probably the biggest giant Pacific man I've ever been in the water with. She had to be 16, 20 feet in wingspan, and she was pregnant. And so she came down, and, I kind of like everything else, man. I just kind of rest and let the animal dictate the encounter. And she came down to me, and they really enjoy your bubbles when you excel them, kind of tickles them, But I'm thinking, man, I'm going to get a shot of a manta being born because that's never happened because they go really deep when they do it, right? I didn't get that shot. She was ovulating, which is clear in the photographs I took. But she kept coming down, and she's just rubbing against me, first through my bubbles. And I spent 60 minutes with this animal, and it was incredible. Not another person in the water. Finally, the group came back around, and she rolled off. But that's probably my most epic and memorable experience. And it's something you just have to be there for. It's the magic of something like that. She's looking at you. The animal's comfortable with you. And it was kind of surreal. So I dug it a lot.
I can't imagine being in the water with something that has a 16-foot wingspan and then you're just like, but it's kind of, I don't know. It seems like, we put this face on these animals that we think are so big and they're just going to be fierce because they're big. But in reality, they're just pretty gentle, across the board, whether it's a whale or a shark or a manta, any of that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's like sharks are like bears, man. People see my photographs, see some of my recent work on my Instagram. They're like, oh my God, you're so close to these bears, and how come they don't attack you? They're so vicious. And I always relate it to sharks because it's the same exact thing, right? We're not on their menu. If you're smart and you know your subject, I spent a lot of time studying bears, sharks, things like that. Because when you're in the water, in the wild with them, there's 100 things they're going to tell you with their body language. Very rare are you ever going to have an occasion where, a bear just comes at you. You see this popular mountain lion video that's all over the internet this week, right? And they show this mountain lion coming down the trail with these people. What they don't show is the guy's in there trying to take video of the cubs. He's between the mom and the cubs, which is galactically stupid. Anytime you get yourself in a situation like that, obviously the mom's going to try to protect. And it's the same thing in the wild. You look at these bears, they're going to do a lot of things. They're going to tell you a lot with their body language. And it's no different than a marine species. You got to observe what the shark's doing. Where its pectoral fins are, the behavior it's exhibiting, and it'll tell you when it wants you out of its way. It's kind of a bummer that things get such a bad rap. There's another occasion, if I got a second, I'll tell you. I was in Ketchikan diving with Fred Drake, owns a company, Snorkel Alaska, right? All these cruise shippers come up to snorkel. Great operation, but me and him were diving one day, and I was photographing some wolf eels. And you ever kind of out in the wild, and you get that feeling, man, there's something behind me, right? So I turn around, and there's an orca with her calf. And this is a transient orca, so I'm a little worried, It's like, but she came over to me 2 or 3 times. She came in and checked me out, circled around me, and went off, and then allowed the calf to come in and play with me for a few minutes. And again, one of those surreal situations where I just feel like if you're calm and you're educated about what you're shooting, the animals, they just, I don't know if I'm lucky or just what, but they kind of always seem just to come in and hang out. So.
Hey, can you explain just for our audience? I think Mark and I were on a trip and we learned about orcas and what you just said, but maybe for our audience, you said transient and that made you a little scared. So could tell us the difference between like a resident orca and a transient orca and why people, or why you would look at them differently?
Well, I'll tell you, I was just up in Juneau, and so we're sitting there, and there's every summer in July, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 orcas come together, right? Different families. They come together to breed, to mate, and it's a pretty cool thing. But all these sea lions, all these harbor seals, all these things will be in the water with them, right? Sea lions, you'll see them cruising around, not afraid of the animal at all. And that's a resident pod. And resident pods are exactly that. They live in those areas. You'll find them in Victoria and in British Columbia, all over the world, and they generally stay there. They live in those areas, right? And they feed. But what they do is they eat fish primarily. They don't eat mammals. And so it's so crazy that these animals know that. So all of a sudden, two transients come around. We were just off Shelter Island, and these two transients come in, and all of a sudden, you don't even know all these seals and sea lions are in the water, right? And all of a sudden, they're all to the surface, and they're just booking for the shore. And the reason is exactly that. They're there to eat sea lions, seals, and the traditional things we think of orcas eating. So it's really the main difference. Transient is exactly what it says. They go from place to place, cruise around where a resident pod generally lives. And resident pods are generally bigger. And the difference is their dorsal fin, the shape of the dorsal fin. So, but I think it's got to be something with their sonar. They must hunt differently. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know the particulars of that. But it's got to be something that allows these other animals to know, because they don't just look over and go, oh man, look, it's curved dorsal fin, it's going to kill me. No, they know well before that it gets in visual range that the animals they're hunting. So like I said, when I saw them, it was a little more nerve-wracking because if it's a resident pod of orcas, you just don't have nothing to worry about. So, but in that case, turns out nothing to worry about it anyway. So it's good.
That's fascinating. Just that whole dynamic and just knowing what goes on. And I just can't imagine. Yeah, the experience has got to be crazy.
It is. It's good. And if you spend a lot of time out in the wild, man, you run into a lot of experiences like that. I'm pretty fortunate. I tell people all the time that it's not just the photographing. In fact, sometimes things happen that you almost forget to take a photograph. You're so mesmerized in that moment. And a lot of times, especially underwater, man, I'll leave the camera. Like with these bears and over the last month of being up in Katmai, sometimes I just go out and sit, and really try to ground myself and enjoy the actual experience rather than feeling like, oh, I got to capture the shot. Because a lot of times we miss so much. I'm always looking through that viewfinder, always looking for that angle or shot. And sometimes it's cool just to put that down and sit and be reminded of why I love what I do.
Everybody should do that when you get into those spaces, right? Just let it get into your system and feel it. Yeah,
absolutely.
So if you had to describe the amount of time that you spend on land and the amount of time you spend in water, what's that percentage? I mean, is it 50-50? Would you rather it be 75-25? What is it for you that you get to do?
It's probably 50-50. It's my career. I was always a hobbyist photographer, and I got lucky, got published, and most of that was underwater at the beginning. And I mean, I spent a lot of time in Alaska. I love it up there. I love places like that, the Arctic. And so I love both, right? So it's not really one's, I love being underwater. That moment, I tell people all the time, in the moment you roll back off a boat or you giant stride in and you're just surrounded with that rush of water, that cool, and it's crystal clear. And my favorite thing is it's silent, right? I don't know if you've been on my website, but welcome to the silence. It's exactly what that means. It's like Alaska as well. It's something that I really enjoy. When you're underwater, it's just me. My girlfriend says to me, hey, we ought to get these full face dive masks so we can talk to each other. And I tell her all the time, the day we get those is the day I stop diving with you.
Zen and focus to it, right? I mean,
yeah, it's just, I love being underwater, but above water, especially places, I know I keep going back to Alaska. That's just one of my favorite places to be. I mean, Alaska is so vast. It's so unexplored. it's just got all these amazing places. It's like you said, it's almost surreal. It's spending time up there out in the wild like that, trying to get away from crowds and just the space you have. Compared to where I live here on the East Coast, I love it. But I love being underwater. I'm heading down to Belize next on November 7th. I go down there. I had a workshop and do some diving. So this year has kind of been a damper. Big travel plans were canceled. My 2 months I was supposed to spend in Indonesia, I was actually in Palau, luckily, last February, March, when the pandemic hit. And, we were kicked out of there, I think it was March 20th, and came home to this. Swindled in a couple little trips this summer down in St. Lucia. Amazing trip down there underwater. Totally tragic what's going on down there with the pandemic, man. They had this beautiful marine park they established in 2011. I lied, 2014. When I first dove there in 2011, it was mediocre diving at best. And when I went back in 2017 and 19 to write stories on it, it was amazing, man. This marine park had really just been unbelievable. But when the pandemic hit, small nations like that, they don't have financial resources. And so they allowed people to fish, and they allowed them to fish in these marine parks. And what the population did was just take nets, and they attach like a 2x12 board to it, and they angle that board, and they simply drag it across the reef. And when you destroy the reef, you're looking at 10 to 12 years before that will ever recover. And the one thing I brought back from St. Lucia that I remember the most is I didn't see a single fish over probably 6 inches long. So everything that used to be beautiful, seahorses, all this macro life, but like everything else, if you take away that the actual coral and damage the reef, then you take away all life. And of course, understand, it's an economically more towards third worldish country, and people have to survive. And so I went down there thinking, oh man, I'm going to see this pristine reef. No one's dove it for or dived it for 5 months. It's going to look amazing. So it's quite disappointing.
That's sad.
Sad to hear. It is
for sure.
But to answer your original question, would I rather be above or below water? I'll take either, man. Just as long as I'm out in the wild, and I'm just as happy taking photos down at the National Zoo with with that program down there as I am being underwater. So
your website says you've done over 3,000 dives, so you'd clearly like to be underwater. Yeah. That's phenomenal.
I got to update that. I think I'm right around 4,700. People say it's crazy to track at this point.
Right. But yeah. Okay.
I started diving. I dove in the military years ago, and if you've ever dove in the military, you would probably hate it. And so when I didn't dive again until 2008, and I was sitting in Cancun and decided to do a DSD. And that next year, 2009, I got into it. So in 11 years, 4,700 dives. It's a lot, and I enjoy it. And there's all these bucket list places to go. And as the climate changes and we start to lose some of these great places like the Great Barrier Reef, things like that start to deteriorate, we're also gaining reef in other places, other areas that tended to be too cold for lush reef systems. As they warm, it's getting more and more stuff to dive. So as we're unfortunately losing some stuff, we're gaining some as well. I don't know if we're gaining it at the speed we're losing it, but it's pretty cool.
I know my daughter lives in Australia, and she's just got into diving, and almost every weekend they're out now along the coast and just loving every minute of it. And it's such a unique and wonderful experience, right? So many people that I know that once they've started it, get hooked on it and love being underwater with that.
I agree. It's one of those things that people either love it or they don't do it again.
You have to be comfortable,
exactly,
calm, collected, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I had 2 daughters, and my 22-year-old learned to dive when she was 10, and she doesn't do it any longer. Just she did it, didn't appeal to her. She's been around the world over in Palau, the Indo-Pacific, to dive. Now my youngest, she couldn't wait to get in the water, and so she started diving last year, and came in with me, and so she'll kind of be my little sidekick. So she's excited to start doing some real traveling with me. Get her over. I'm going to take her over to Palau as well. Places like that. I try to take my girls around quite a bit, so keep them outdoors. But
absolutely, and great bonding for the two of you, right? The experiences that you'll be able to talk about the rest of your lives.
Absolutely.
Whale sharks, if you get lucky, you'll get to see whale sharks.
Exactly.
Like obvious on your Instagram. I mean, you've seen so much, and not just the large cetaceans and sharks, but I love the close-up fish, the detail, the little crabs, the shrimp, the Nemo, the clownfish, the colorful
Right.
life that you get into such detail in the reef systems. It's great to see that too.
Well, thank you, man. I enjoyed it, especially places like the Philippines. Probably one of the most underrated dive destinations in the world. Super inexpensive. The people are amazing, just like they are in Indonesia and places like that. But in that entire coral triangle, I try to tell people here in the Caribbean, when I encounter them, you have 650 species of coral and fish in the Caribbean, and you have over 6,900. Some say up to 7,200 in the Indo-Pacific. And the Verde Pass in the Philippines is where they've gotten the most diverse life. The what is it from? Is a school in California. I'll think of the name in a minute. They always come out there and do these collections with nudies and different things like that. And it's this amazing macro life, and it is. It's beautiful, man. When you stop and take your time. It seems when divers are new, they like the big things, right? You want to see a turtle, you want to see a manta ray. Of course, whale sharks are always a treat, man. Anytime I see one of those, I still get excited like a kid at Christmas. But you start seeing this little stuff, right? And I guess the equivalent would be people say, well, it'd be like taking pictures of ants or cockroaches or something like that on land that people generally just don't, find it interesting. And so there's these groups that like macro photography underwater, and people are really into it. And we go around and do these critter finds and stuff. But there's some really amazing stuff out there, man. And it's quite colorful. The ocean is one of those things where you never know what you're going to get, right? I pretty much know when you go to Alaska, it's September, there's going to be bears feeding, right? It's July, there's going to be bears in the falls. So all these things can be calculated. If you're going to shoot tigers, you're going to go to India in March. If you're going to go shoot lions, you know when to go to Africa. There's all these times. The ocean is totally different, right? Unless I'm in some place like Truck Lagoon where I'm focusing on wrecks and things like that. But if I'm going to shoot macro, I could roll in today and find everything or find nothing. There's no rhyme or a reason to it. Now, you can raise your chances by studying things, finding out what coral species they live on or where you'll be most likely to find them. But like when you're shooting a pygmy seahorse and it's at its longest length, 2 centimeters, and it's the exact same color as the fan, you have to put a UV light on and wave your hand because the motion from you waving the water makes the seahorse go like this, right? And then trying to get that in focus and a current and all these things. So it's very challenging. Then we have light to deal with. When I'm shooting bears or whales, here's the sun. I know I got to be between the sun and the object, right? Underwater,
right.
You don't always get that, and you have to play with those light settings and constantly, because as the sun goes behind clouds above water, it gets darker. There's all these different variables when it comes to dealing with light underwater that makes it quite challenging and quite exciting.
So how deep are you doing that sort of stuff? Are you getting a lot of ambient light, or are you using all artificial light?
Well, if you look on my my Instagram or website, and you see these mandarin fish, that dive is 6 to 10 feet. Right, they're sometimes I could stand and put my head out of the water and take a breath. Other times, pygmy seahorses, generally like 100 feet, right around there. They generally try to stay a little deeper, stay in these fans. There's 9 species of them, so some of the species are shallow, some don't live in fans. We're finding more and more all the time. But generally, anytime in diving, everything you're going to see is going to be between 12 feet deep and 100 max. Usually between 60 and the surface is where you find most of your life, right? Because you have most of your light in the light transmission. The plants, the coral, the fans need that to grow, and so they don't grow in dark areas. So the farther you get down the wall, I see all these divers that are like, oh, I want to go deep. Let's go down 140 feet. It's like, all right, we'll go down there, but there's not going to be anything. All the good stuff is usually at the top of the reef, and but it's definitely pretty cool and pretty colorful.
So at 60 feet, are you getting any ambient light at all, or is it just dark?
Yeah, no, you get an ambient light, but what you've lost is color, right? So as we go down in depth, starting at 12 feet, you lose your reds. You start to lose the color spectrum. So when you don't illuminate something, you can look at a photograph that someone took with no lighting, and you're like, wow, that's pretty dull, right? It looks gray, it looks brown. When you light that, then you see that color. And so that's the reason when we dive, we have to have strobes. You can use some constant lighting, macro. It's good to use company Big Blue. I exclusively use their fixed lights, which are incredible. I use Inon for my strobes. And usually I have a combination of both those, especially a red light, very important when you're diving and doing any photography underwater, because an animal will leave with bright white light. With a red light, it doesn't see that light. And so the animal will keep doing what it's doing. So when I'm shooting those mandarin fish, it's dusk, and you sit there for about 45 minutes. When the action starts, they pick their mate. You watch them in the rubble. But when they come up, you have exactly 1.5 seconds to capture from the time they leave the reef till she releases the eggs, he releases the sperm, and boom, it's like high school. It's over like that, right? And
No
so
comment.
you have to really be on. So to know your settings, and when I give these workshops and take people out, I'm like, you have to have, for these strobes that take a second and a half to recycle, you have to have your settings set up to where your shutter speed's right. You're going to capture the moment. You're going to be able to get bursts of light, 3 to 4 exposures without that having to recycle. Just things like that. And it's frustrating because it takes so long to do it. And if you miss it, or it's off, or someone's too close to you and has a white light, because again, it goes back to why I like to dive by myself, or when I'm teaching students. I obviously don't take my camera when I give my workshops. I'm actually working with them, but nothing's more frustrating than you've been there for an hour, right? 13 feet. It's chilly. It's the end of the day. You've been in the water 4 or 5 hours during the day, and it's at night dive, and of course at night it's always colder, right? Because it just is. And you're all ready to set up, and someone shines a flashlight, or someone fires their strobes, and they go in your dome port. And so it's important to be kind of spaced out, but it's frustrating as well. I went for years before I got that shot, and then one night I went, and it was like, I don't know, man. It was some Barry White playing in the background, some bow chicka bow bow, and there was just manner fish mating all over the place. And I captured that shot like 10 times in that one evening. So, but that's how the ocean is. You'll get in some days, the conditions are perfect, the moon's right, nothing happens, and it's just not there. And other days I'll get in expecting to see nothing. I was in this Thailand, in the Similan Islands, place called Elephant Head Rock. The tsunami had been just a few years prior, and it was pretty beat up to diving, right? I remember seeing this one turtle kind of looking at me like, help, either feed me or kill me, but move me out of my misery. And it was really bad diving. And I got in, I had a macro lens set up, and I was just going to shoot. I was actually shooting some nudies, and people were screaming, and up above me is this whale shark with its calf. And boom, the entire dive with it. And then I went up to the boat, took my macro up and grabbed my wide angle and came down and spent an entire dive with that. We had lunch, got back in, and they were still both there. So that's what makes the ocean unique. You never ever know when you get in what you're going to see. So
it's the thrill of wildlife photography, and especially in the ocean, as you say. So am I right in guessing nudibranch? No, is that what?
Yeah, nudibranch. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, so when you say nudies, just for our audience listening, that you're photographing underwater.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Nudibranch.
This is Wild and Exposed podcast. No.
Yeah, they're not nude.
What is a nudibranch?
It's a form of slug, and it has its gills and its lungs both exposed on the outside of the body. They're beautiful creatures. They come in a variety of colors. Anything bright in the ocean generally is poisonous. If it's on the reef and it's bright for a reason, and it's to warn predators. So, but nudies they're amazing. They're one of those critters that you look for all the time. Deloach does a book every year with nudies, and it's constantly updated. I don't know, California Academy of Science, that's what I was trying to remember earlier. They have hundreds of nudies you have to be identified, because you have to find a mating pair to identify new species. And so some of them look like they're nothing. You go right by them, right? They're incredible. And they're very, very easy to shoot. You can play with light because they move at, I don't know, maybe 1 meter an hour if they're lucky. But they're very beautiful, very cool to watch. Very fun to photograph.
Almost some of the colors are almost psychedelic, right? I mean, it's just so vibrant. How big are they? I mean, I think I saw one by the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, but it was only an inch and a half long. Could they be that small, some of them?
They can be down to a couple, maybe half a centimeter. Some of them, they're tiny. Like if you're in the Caribbean, especially, like on the Kittiwake, if you ever dive that wreck, you look in the portholes there, you'll always find them around, but they're very tiny. And others will get up to a dollar bill size. Your Spanish dancers are quite huge. Some of the different nudibranchs out there are just beautiful. And then they have several species of slugs. Some people mistake them with nudibranchs, but there's things like ribbon eels, things like that, also very beautiful. They're not all nudies. The thing that make a nudibranch is their lungs are exposed on their backs. Looks like a very colorful plume of almost like a bouquet of flowers. Okay. That sits on the back, and then the gills that are exposed from the head. And they're absolutely beautiful animals.
Do you see them in open water sometimes, or usually sheltered crevices?
Usually they're on what they eat. So if you want to find a certain, like there's a nudibranch called an Alani nudie. It's one of my favorites. Beautiful species, and it eats a certain type of coral. And so to look for that animal, I just look for that type of coral, right? But they camouflage so incredibly well. Sometimes you'll be looking and looking. It's usually when I'm not looking for them that I find them, because I'm not focused on trying to find them. I'm just like, oh, there's a nudie. it's usually when I have a wide angle lens, so it's usually how that works. That's the joy of point and shoots underwater, is you got that option to zoom in or pan out. But as you know, with a fixed focal length lens, you get what you get. So
Something about your Instagram. So everybody listening, if they're not familiar with your Instagram, they need to go there and check it out. It's just the diversity of this marine life, terrestrial life too, but really you highlight. I mean, I'm always enthralled with planet Earth, from insects, right? Butterflies, what monarchs do, what shorebirds do, migrations, large mammals. Under the ocean surface, there's so much life, and you highlight that so well with your portfolio, and it's just great and refreshing to see that broad interest covered. So yeah, people, please go check it out. I don't know if you mind us spinning into, and I don't know, I don't want to curtail any other questions from you guys, but with Instagram, do you mind if we ask some questions about Instagram? I'm familiar with your work on there for as long as I've been on, and I don't know if it's 3 or 4 years now that I've been living on that social media platform as far as promoting work and growing that. And hats off to you, warranted, wonderful following that you have of over 400,000 people. A question that I have is, we're always thinking about Instagram, how to make it successful for people. Obviously, quality imagery is very important. Good captioning is important. Proper use of hashtags important. Timing can be important as when people post. But a question that came up for me looking at your impressive feed, and based on your success, high five there, is that you tend to post multiple images when you do a post. It could be 6, it could be 10, telling the storyline where people can flip through. Have you found that to be more successful than just posting a singular image?
Well, what I find is you have to keep up with Instagram's algorithms, and so there's some homework that has to be done on that. Fortunately for me, my girlfriend went to school just for that, and when I met her, she was working as a publicist for Nat Geo. So she monthly sits down and takes the Instagram classes, so to speak, on the net, finds out what's going on, how it's trending this month, what they're doing differently, right? Because they're constantly changing. So what I try to do is change it. And what I found right now is videos are very popular. But I try to get a combination of that. Like, there are still times I'll post a singular image. But like today, when I posted the video of me taking pictures of the bear cubs. I'll get into that story maybe later on about these amazing bear cubs. So the video kind of draws people in. They love it, right? But okay, so the video of me shooting, now let me show you some images of what I was shooting and what I achieved in that particular moment, if that makes sense. And then there's videos like the whale the other day that breached. We're in Juneau, Alaska, and I got a great friend I grew up with in Pittsburgh. Never been out anywhere, so I took him up to Alaska. Right, I had 4 days in between my 2 Katmai trips. I flew down to Juneau and met my girlfriend and John, and took him out. And this guy's like a good luck charm. I'm going to take him to Alaska all the time. He goes out, man.
Nice when you find those.
Right. I mean, right in front of the boat. And I put that video on, right? To have your camera out and in slow motion when a whale begins its full breach right directly off the bow of the boat. I should have just played the lottery that day, but that's how rare it is. But I put that on Instagram, and I put that on singularly, and then afterwards I'll show you some actual still photos that I have. But in that case, there's no still photos to follow because we're taking a video, and so I didn't capture any still photos. But I find a variety. I find that what I'll do is I'll just kind of play with it and see what engages people. Obviously, the conversation. One of the most important things I tell people is, people follow me, right? And I'm always humbled by that, to have that many people that want to see my work. You get up every day, you see people message you, you have 400 comments. It takes time to go through those, even to the point where I have a large following in Russia, and I'll take those and put them into the translator and respond to them, because I feel like it's important to, respond if they have a question. I have some very good friends, met a lot of photographers along the way, and I meet one or two types of photographers. You meet humble, willing to help, which I would include myself in that. And then you meet some that are like, hey, I have 1 million followers. Boom. I don't need to talk to you. I don't need to respond to these things. For me, it's very important to respond. So kids will send me an email or a message saying, hey, what sort of camera do you use? Right? It's very easy just to click through that. I don't have time to waste. But to them, it's important, especially I have a lot of followers in smaller countries, things like that. So I find engaging with them keeps them on your page and keeps them engaged with you. And with anything, I just find it's I'm always a person that loves talking photography. I love helping people out. So people come, when I lecture and things like that, I'm always happy to stay. To my girlfriend's dismay, because we'll be there for hours. I enjoy talking to people, and I feel like if people have taken the time to follow my work or come and see me, then those people are important, and you have to take the time for them. And again, it's something I genuinely love and enjoy. So there is a lot of value in finding someone, and luckily I happen to date her, but to find someone that knows all of that, right, and who is familiar with what's going on, how the algorithms work, how the system works, how you are in their feed, because it changed dramatically when they were bought by Facebook and they went to a revenue-based system. When we had an organic system where, hey, man, everything was organic, it came down the feed in order. That just doesn't happen anymore. It's really about being out there on top of it and just keeping some variety.
Do you find, based on that change of the algorithm, that paying to sponsor occasionally is useful, or is that?
It is, and in my case, luckily, I have some great sponsors, some great ambassadorships with different companies in diving and above water. So it's good to get it out there, and even if you use some of your own money from time to time to promote something, I don't think it's bad. I really don't know how much value is in it, because I don't do it a lot. I do it because it makes sense from time to time. And most of my work, my professional work, I would say 90% of it has originated from Instagram, because people instantly go on there, and try to find it, trying to get that little blue mark, which I still haven't achieved. And I've gone to Facebook 1,000 times.
No way. You're so deserving of it, man. It's like,
Well,
it was one of the questions that came to me this afternoon. I was like, how does Greg not have the blue check mark?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I've done everything they've asked. You send it in, it's a crapshoot. You get it or you don't get it. And I finally even the copyright, getting your actual copyright sent into them. So there are attorneys that do it. So I've considered having it done, but I just don't know how much it really helps. I was talking to some friends about it. I got a good friend that got it, and she had a couple thousand followers. So there's really no rhyme or reason. She just sent a copy of her driver's license in. She said she woke up one morning, it was there. It's one of those things, but people look for it. It's an official brand. On the downside, like this morning, I got an email. There's some guy on LinkedIn stole my profiles, got all my pictures up. So you're dealing with that constantly, and it's like the fifth time that someone's not hacked my account, but taken it, and they live your life, man. They take your pictures. It's why very rarely I'll put a picture of my daughter's. Usually it's just on an Instagram story when I do that, because there's people out there that just take it. But if you're in this field, you have to be on social media. Your presence on Facebook. I really don't do a lot of Facebook because Instagram is kind of Facebook's platform. But I would love to see someone put out an organic product again that stayed organic, but it doesn't. Velo put it out, it gets popular, they go public, they sell to somebody, and that's really what it's about. So, but grossly important in photography, and it can't be understated how important it is to get out there, and whether you do it or not, or whether you pay someone to do it, get someone that really knows what they're doing. Not one of these people that spam you on Instagram and say, "Hey, I'll get you 1 million followers," because if they're bot accounts or they're not real, then it doesn't matter, right? There'll be some days I lose 2,000 followers in a day, so I know that it's just bot accounts that people have set up, or they're trying, and so there's all that. But
yeah, that's part of it. That's the ebb and flow. And it's so critical, especially in the global marketplace. There's potential out there, and it's the best platform now to highlight one's portfolio, so that whatever the client might be.
Exactly. Like this week, I had a guy from Russia doing his bathroom in my photographs, right? And I mean, it was a nice sale. I mean, he just hit me up strictly off Instagram. He's like, "Hey, I like this shot of this ship," and that's why I said it's important. We have iTranslate. People hit me up in different languages all the time. My daughter happens to be fluent. I put my girls in immersion school, so my youngest reads, writes, and speaks Russian. But when she's not here to interpret for me, I put it in there. I've got a lot of clients over there that buy a lot of photographs and take my courses. So it's cool. Got some clients going up to Alaska. Just got invited today over to Kamchatka to take some pictures of Russians' versions of grizzly bears.
So hold on a sec. You do a tour in Kamchatka?
I got invited there next year. Just today, a company hit me up, wants me to come over and photograph over there. I don't know if you've ever been to Russia, but I love it because it's like, it's wild, man. It's untamed. Like they do things different. I went over first time to Russia. Like, I don't know if we got time for this story, but I was flying.
Keep going.
A MiG-25. My father does some work in the airline business, and he was doing some aircraft were coming off a lease from Aeroflot. So he was over doing some work. So I went over to fly this MiG-25, right? Because I'm a big aviation enthusiast. And this huge Russian comes out. I mean, I'm 6'6", and this guy's dwarfing me, right? And he's got his flight suit, he's got a gun. I don't have anything, I mean, I got a G suit on, but other than that, I got no knife, I got no fur coat. And he says to me, I said, do you have any advice for me? He said, yeah. If I tell you to eject and you say, huh, you'll be talking to yourself. So that was it, man. We got it. It's flying, and they're kind of wild like that. So I'm looking forward to doing some wildlife photography over there. I know they got some beautiful bears, and proximity is so close to Alaska. I'm sure it's got to be similar. And it's one of those places where I feel like there's a lot of unexplored things to find. Often when I'm flying, I'll go through Korea, and so I fly up over the pole, and we'll come right down over Siberia. And I'm always looking out the window down there, and there's this vast, unexplored area over there. And so I'm excited to get over and check it out.
That's the one place that I've wanted to go for 10, 15 years. I just think Kamchatka, I mean, I've watched some films on it, and they talk about rivers that have never been fished.
Exactly my point, right? It's got so much. I'm flying over these peaks, and I also am a big climber and enjoy that. But I'm flying over these peaks, and my dream, like 2 years ago, I went and did some work over in Everest, and it's cool, right? But it's not about the height. To me, it's about standing someplace no one stood. So as I fly in over these peaks, I'm always looking out the window, trying to kind of map out where we're at on my iPad, because to me, it would be epic, even if it's, I don't know, 15, 16,000 feet. I don't care. I just want to stand someplace in the world today that no one's been before. I watch this. I tell my girlfriend all the time I was born 100 years too late, because you have these epic, you watch like, the other day we were watching an Everest special, about Mallory and Irvine, and to go to Everest in 1924, right? This wasn't like, hey, I'm going to jump on a plane, I'm going to lay out my first class seat, have a nice meal, and boom, I'm there. No, this was this was trains, this was steamships. It was months of your life, and here you are at the base of this mountain in some basically what's the equivalent of our wool underwear today, standing there with a single rope and this other guy. And there's nobody dragging you to the top. You haven't paid $100,000 to have someone guide you up there, right? This is just raw exploration. And when I fly over those parts of Russia, I'm always just amazed that more is not going on there, and they're not maybe embracing that a little more. And maybe that's good, right? Because like you said, there's rivers that haven't been fished, and it's got to be amazing. Because if I look at Alaska, and I've never, you're gonna laugh, I've never fished. Really, when I was a kid, I did, but this year I was up at Kulik Lodge and some friends up there. They're really great people, and the staff took me out there like, you got to fish. I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to drive you guys crazy, right? Because I probably suck at it. So they gave me this fly rod, 26.5-inch rainbow trout, 15 minutes in a fishing rod. I call my brother, who's got this 15-inch one mounted in his house, like that's his life achievement, right? Fish, and he's been fishing every day since we were kids, and I'm like, yo, brother, check this out, man. I got this huge fish, and in 3 hours, man, I caught 20-some rainbow trout. None of them are under 23 inches long. And it's incredible because they're just sitting behind these sockeye. You just throw those beads, man, and they just. So yeah, over there they got to have some really really cool stuff to check out.
Yeah, well, I would go there in a heartbeat just because I think it's exactly what you just said.
Yeah, it is. Well, I'll keep in touch, man, and we'll go. I'll tell them I got this. There's two of us. I got to bring two.
That'd be great. So you do workshops, right? Can you just explain that, and then where people could find that kind of stuff?
Yeah, my new website's coming up. I just started a branch out with a new company. It's called Alaska Photo Travel, and it's going to encompass all my tours together, my underwater and above, in one convenient place. Because really I haven't advertised it much, and I sell out all my trips. Diving generally, a liveaboard or land-based. Liveaboard, I can take usually 20 divers fit on a boat. Some of those people just go to dive with me, and some go to learn. And what I do when I give workshops personally, I'll touch on the underwater ones first. I feel like I've had people come diving with me, and they've been to 2 or 3 workshops, and they have, companies that sell underwater equipment give these workshops, and they get these guys to buy everything, and they go, well, they're not paying. So that's the whole thing of it, right? They go for free, and they go to dive. They don't go to teach anybody anything. It really annoys me because this kid had these Xenon strobes, and he's like, Greg, man, how do you shoot at f/28 and still and get this photo. Like I can't expose anything at that. I just don't have enough light. And I'm like, you're crazy, man. You're using these great strobes, and he never even had the pre-flash turned off, right? Uh, and 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 so you're really not being taught anything. So when I go, one of my pet peeves is people have paid me to learn, right? They're not paying me to go and take my photos. They're paying me to teach them how to take theirs. And I will dive with my camera a few times to show them things that are relevant underneath, but I enjoy diving with them. So during the course of that week, I'll dive with you personally 2 to 3 times and show you, because I have to show you how to use the camera, right? What you're doing wrong. So many people out there have these tools and they have they've got the best equipment. They show up and they just have no idea what it does, right? And they're looking for the little green guy running, and I'm like, that is not one of those. You have to understand the tool, right? We have how do you make it work? You can give someone a saw or a welding machine, doesn't mean they're going to make. You can give me a great oven, doesn't mean I'm going to cook you an amazing chef-style Michelin meal. But so I tell them all the time, it's not necessarily what camera I use, because it's always the question you get. It's how do you use that tool? What does it do, right? And it's basic across the board, whether you shoot Sony, Nikon, Olympus, Canon. It's you have to know how to achieve that. And so there's some people that you will never grasp composition. A real good friend of mine up in Alaska, he runs Lodge and Bear Tours, Jerry Jocks, and he'll tell you right off, he's been out with some of the world's best photographers, started with them, right? And there was a point in his career where he sat there and he said, I'm never going to make a living photographing. And I'm standing right next to these guys. I'm in the same animal, same position, same lighting. They're selling, all these photos, and no one wants mine other than my grandmother, which is exactly what he told me. It's right. You can't teach composition. There are people who are masterful. David Dubois, a good friend of mine, underwater photographer, for National Geographic, Rolex named a watch after him. The man is incredible. And when I got the opportunity to meet him, I learned a lot, and I kind of set up my photo courses in the same way. And I was in a room with him in the Philippines, and he has 12 underwater housings, right? Because if you're David, you get 11 people that follow you with every lens. And when you want a new camera, there's a guy behind you handing there, and they're in order in order he thinks which ones he'll need first. But the knowledge of spending 6 or 7 hours in there while he's setting up these cameras, right, and having conversations with him and listening to him talk, you're just absorbing all this stuff. And so when I go out, I really try to spend time with people and share with them what I know, help them. There are limits. We're all different artistic interpretations of things, and different things appeal to us. But I try to really push the fact that photography is for me. Photography is for you, right? It's something that we go out and we do, and it should please you. And I think if people step back and they worry a little less about, hey, am I going to get 1 million likes? We live in this world where our total worth and self-esteem is based on that, right? And I'll put up a photograph I love, and it might get 5,000 likes, and I'll put up one, and it's got that in 15 minutes, and you're like, wow, man, that's not one I would have thought. And it's no different with editors. I'll send in a set of pictures for a story, and the ones they pick, I'm like, wow, really, man? That's not even. But that's really what it's about, man. I tell people all the time, take pictures, go out, spend some money, take some courses with some people, but go out and shoot. You'll get better at it. And again, it's not about. It's about how it makes you feel, and capturing those moments in time. So, but back to the workshops, yeah, that's it. So the diving I run pretty straightforward. I do some at Atlantis Resorts in the Philippines on my macro courses. I'll do one at Sunset House in Grand Cayman. It's convenient to be in the Caribbean, although the Caribbean sometimes is painful for me, especially when it comes to macro life, because it's so colorless. There's really cool things to find, but the amount of time to find them differs hugely. Jawfish, for instance, with the eggs in their mouth when they're brooding them. Not a lot of people, and you guys know this, right? You're not going to go to Alaska with me and come home with an eagle snagging a salmon. You're not going to come home with a whale breaching right in front of us. You're not going to come home with all these images that I've spent years and months out in the wild trying to capture, right? Talk to Drew. You had mentioned him earlier. He spends every day in Alaska in the summer out with the bears, and I might capture an image that he doesn't get the minute I walk out into the woods. And so people have the misconception of thinking, hey, I'm going to go to Alaska for a week, and this is like they have this checklist with all these boxes, right? I got to get this, and that. And especially in diving, there's all these critters. They come on, they're like, okay, you're going to find this. I'm like, well, I'll find it if it's under there and I happen to see it. But there's no real guarantee. That's kind of how I run them. The workshops up in Alaska, things like that. I do a water and wings tour out of Juneau. Currently, a company called North River in Oregon is building me a photography specific boat to use up there, close to the water. It's going to be pretty awesome. And that tour focuses on the bears at Pack Creek, which are significantly different. The ABC Islands in Alaska, the population of brown bear is incredible, but it's a different bear than you see in Katmai. Main difference is their menu in the ABC Islands is a lot of clams. They clam a lot. So they have a much more pronounced hump on their back because they use that muscle to dig and turn clams. And so you'll get the bears at Pack Creek. We'll spend some time at the glaciers with some of the different seals. And then, of course, the whales. People love shooting whales. That's what the tour encompasses in those areas. And then, of course, my Katmai tours. And next year, I'm expanding up to Svalbard with some friends of mine that own a company that operates out of there up in the Arctic. Main thing is focusing on the clients. I see two different kinds of trips, really. I see trips that, like I said earlier, are used to finance a photographer's portfolio. And then there are trips and workshops that you can find that are really built around enhancing your portfolio and your skill set. So that's what I try to do.
Sounds like a phenomenal experience for your guests.
Yeah, it's I enjoy it as much as they do. I think, again, I feel privileged and always humbled that people would be willing to pay to hang out with you and learn something, because I'm very critical of my photography, which I think most artists are, and that's across the board in any form of art I do.
Can I ask, I've got a couple of things. I'd love to hear the story. I was digging into your Instagram just because there's so much variety there. Back in October 17th, 2018 post, Papua New Guinea, pirates boarded your small boat. There you are.
Yeah.
Towering with these two guys with their automatic weapons, and they were there to rob you guys. What happened?
So I never forget, right? Good friend of mine, Bruno, owns this boat, this dive boat, and I'll leave the name of his dive boat out of it. But we're in a place in Indonesia where Indonesia ends and Papua New Guinea begins, below Triton Bay. We're doing some exploratory diving. Well, how the maritime rule works over there, if I'm diving in front of your property, I have to get your permission, right? So Bruno is on land negotiating with these landowners if we can dive here in these particular spots. And I'm just sitting there, and all of a sudden, there's these pirates, man, in different
full camo.
Yeah, right. Different types of camo. But I was in the Army for a bit, as I mentioned earlier, and it very much reminded me of my time in Somalia. How these guys look. They were a very ragtag bunch. And so I'm looking at them, and I got this friend Jeff with me, and I said, and they're like, "Hey, you need your passports and your money and get up to the salon." And I'm like, "No, I'm not not going out like that, right? I'm not going to be on TV getting my head cut off with a spoon while my mom watches at home." So I just said no. We went down. I got my sat phone, and the only weapon I had was a knife, and I took my camera, and I went out back, and they had left two guards in charge of their skiff, right? And so I started posing with them and having Jeff take my picture. I was like, I'm telling them, "Hey, man, I work for a magazine." The only words they know is National Geographic, so I'm throwing that at them. And I'm like, "Yeah, take your picture," and I'm posing with him. What I was really trying to do is get close. I mean, this is all just dumb military stuff. The guy was right-handed. He had his weapons slung left-handed, and he had the safety against his chest. So I felt very confident that should something go down, my plan was to just disarm him and the other. And me and Jeff were taking their boat and rolling. That was generally our plan. We didn't know anyone else in the boat. They were all European. And so as this is going on, Bruno shows back up, and Bruno paid him, gave him a bunch of liquor, and they rolled out. And it turned out later that they're there guarding these Chinese pearl farms, and they just harass ships as they come through, man, to get whatever money people will give them. It's comical now looking back at that time. I'm thinking, even if we get in their speedboat, where are we going to go? I don't know if you've ever spent any time in that area of the world, but it's pretty remote, man. One time I was in the Solomon Islands, and I got separated from the group, right? So I got this EPIRB, and I had floated in the current around this wall out of sight of the Zodiacs or the main dive boat. So it took a couple hours for them to catch up with me. For whatever reason, this thing, it gives a direct signal, but there's an island between us, so they're not getting my signal. So I'm sitting here, and I'm treading water as long as I can. So I figure, man, I'm going to go to shore. The best chance of finding me, I'll just go sit on the shore. So I'm sitting on the shore, and it happens to be this island in the Solomon Islands where there is either they put or live there, all deaf people, right? And in the Solomons, they will cover themselves in mud. It keeps the flies off them in the sun. So here I am sitting in my scuba tank with this huge camera rig and my fins, and this guy's walking down the beach, right? And I'm like, hey, and then he's got this machete, and I'm like, hey, and he keeps walking towards me because he's deaf and he can't hear me, right? Now, I don't know this at the time. So I'm like, and then a couple more come out of the woods, and they're all covered in mud, man. So here I am scrambling down this beach because I'm like, my only hope is to get in the water, right? I swam out and I sat out there with these bunch of reef sharks, and they just, by this time there's 10 people sitting on this beach just looking at me, and I'm seriously thinking I'm going to be dinner, right? Because in these areas of the world, I visited these caves where cannibalism up until about 20 years ago still existed, and so that's what my whole thought process is. So the boat came finally and picked me up and found me, and then they explained to me that they were just trying to be friendly because they're deaf. Well, I don't know they're deaf. They're just not responding to me, So it was. I was probably more nervous there than I was in with the pirates. But,
it sounds it, man. If they're covered in mud and carrying machetes, the first instinct is not to think friendly.
Right, exactly. Right, that's what I'm thinking. He's got a machete and he's covered in mud, and it looks like,
hard times.
Right. Exactly.
Not the beach to be sunbathing on.
Exactly. But that's the joy of traveling. That's what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about this adventure where you go out and things are just unexplored. We have so little of that left on the planet, but it still exists in some of those places. It ended up being a really cool experience. The Solomon Islands is one of my favorite places. It's literally, man, if you took an hourglass and just stopped it, that's what it looks like. It was just like it was when we left there in World War II, and it remains that way today. It's one of the places I give a workshop. I was supposed to be, in fact, last month in the Solomon Islands for the workshop, but unfortunately, due to COVID, we didn't get to go down there, so it's rescheduled to 2022. Amazing place to dive, absolutely unbelievable. The reef, the wrecks, the number of wrecks from World War II, it's pretty cool.
You got to do a book of all these encounters. I mean, it's awesome. I love hearing the stories.
Oh, awesome, man. Yeah. One day, it's, I try to, my girlfriend tells me all the time I should be jotting more of them down. But, that's a story I wouldn't, had he not brought it up. It's one, and I just happened to be flipping through pictures, and I saw that one and I put it up, and I believe I put it someplace before and I'd taken it down. It angered some people. That's the one thing about social media. It's very, you have to play your politically correct game. I don't try to take any opinions, but it offended someone years ago. I believe it was on Facebook, so I removed the picture and tried it again on Instagram.
When I saw that, it's definitely a tense situation, but my interpretation was that you solved it with some degree of friendliness.
Absolutely, and that's what,
that's what it looked like to me.
It was, and went up to him, man, and really, I don't think they're there to harm us. I doubt the weapons were even loaded, to be honest with you. I know the magazine that was in his pocket didn't have any rounds in it. Things that maybe an ordinary person wouldn't look at, but I just always try to assess the situation. And I always find in all situations, man, if you communicate with people, my feeling is if they're there to harm you, that's going to be immediate. If the guy comes on and he shot a couple people or he's waving a gun, then of course you find yourself in a different situation. The camera is one of those things that's universal, right? There's a couple of things in the world. Hotel California by the Eagles, Don't Stop Believing by Journey, and a camera. Those three things will always get you out of a tense situation, because I don't know where I've been in the world. If you start singing Hotel California or Don't Stop Believing, instantly you have a connection with anybody regardless of language.
I love it.
But the camera does it. You come up and you're friendly, you take some pictures with them, and they became more relaxed. Obviously we were more relaxed. You travel a lot, and there's all these issues out there. I talk to people, for instance, about manta rays and the idea that they're so heavily hunted these days. And the one side to conservation people rarely ever want to have a conversation about. You're an Indonesian fisherman, and you go out and you work, not a 9-hour day, 5 days a week. You work dusk till dawn, or dawn till dusk, 7 days a week to make $30 or $40 to feed your family. And some guy comes up to you and says, hey, man, I'll give you $350 if you take out a manta. Just boils down to simple economics, right? We don't have enough dive jobs or conservation jobs to employ these people, and so they go out and do what they can because they're in that same predicament everyone is. You have to feed your family, you have to survive. They're not bad people out there intentionally doing bad things. The guy paying them is a bad guy, and he's doing bad things. But most people out there, the same with shark finning, any of those things, it seems to me to always be a situation where that's a position they're in economically and otherwise. And so it's unfortunate, but it is the way it is.
Definitely, yeah. It's a sign of desperation, and not only do they need education on that, but it's survival, right?
Yeah,
so I understand what you're saying for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, troubling times with just so many people. I don't know. As far as photography for 2020, what's your go-to rig? Have you switched? Are you playing mirrorless at all? Are you on that bandwagon, or is your underwater rig different than your land setup? I see that you're a Canon.
I am. Canon USA, hashtag.
There you go.
All right. No,
Sorry,
I am.
You own Canon USA? We need to talk.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But I do exclusively use the 1DX Mark II or 3 and the now 5D Mark IV. Sometimes I'll still shoot the Mark III. They gave me a 5D, 5D, what is it? R, I think it was the super crazy megapixel. Underwater myself, my anything above 24 million pixel, too much. It's too much. You get too much resolution. There's too much scatter in the water. So when you start to get into these new Sonys and you're looking at 52, first off, I don't have room on my computer or on these. Every time I get a new camera, I got to go out and buy a whole new series of cards. And so, but there's just no room for that amount of information. In a portrait, awesome, right? I love it. My niece is a photographer. I actually gave her that camera for a Christmas gift. And it's amazing. You want all that detail in the face. Underwater, we have all this scatter in the water, right? It's naturally there. It's everywhere. And so it picks up too much of that. Same, even my new, the 1DX Mark IIIs I was shooting in Alaska last week, it's, you start picking up too much of the flies in the background, right? There's so much resolution in some of the images that I personally like a little smaller. But I've not gone mirrorless just because the size difference. I'm a fairly big guy at 6'6", 250, so I don't mind holding even long lenses or carrying that gear around. I don't find that the weight or size difference is so significant. Plus, you guys know I'm invested into I don't know how many hundreds of grand worth of lenses, and to have to change all that glass. And if I get a mirrorless camera like the new 6R, okay, cool, I've shaved off a half pound of camera. Now I got to get an adapter to use my 600 is still 600. It still weighs the same, and it's still got to haul it around. And so until it gets to a point where it really significantly reduces that, I don't even think I would consider changing. Now, from what I hear, I don't know that mirror cameras will even be around. I know they were experimenting with a 5DX, which was supposed to replace the 5D Mark IV, and I don't know whatever happened to that. I saw one of them in Alaska last summer, and haven't seen or heard about it since. And I think they're starting to put that money into the mirrorless technology. Now, there are times that I'll use live view, but with this new 1DX Mark III, I'm getting 16 frames per second through the viewfinder. I don't find that I need 20. Shooting a series of Eagles, for instance, one of the biggest things I don't think people understand when it comes to storage and stuff like that. I'm a month in Alaska, and I got 2 terabyte hard drive full of images, right? You got thousands and thousands of images. Because as this eagle's going and he's turning, I see him beginning his dive. From that point, I'm focused on him, and it's just constant. Because you'll go through 100 images and there's this one, right? It's like tomorrow I'm going to post this bear image on Instagram just to check it out. They're fighting, and it's this one point where his head is turned in the white of his eye, and there's no way that you're going to capture that except for luck to sit there and go, okay, there it is, boom, I'm going to take that picture. Because it's a constant evolving thing. And so to have the ability to shoot that is one thing, but to sit there and go back through all those photos, that's what I spend my flight times doing, is editing photographs. And I tell people all the time, the real work starts when I get back here, when you're actually back in the office going through these photos. But it's amazing to me. I'll put them up on my iMac Pro here, and I'll go through them, and then you're like, wow, like I can't even believe I captured that moment. The bear is coming out of the water, just that moment when the water is still shedding off his head and the salmon's face is out of the water, trying to get that. I always am envious of these, in remembering when I used to shoot film and imagining 36 shots, right? I just took that in a second and a half. That would have been like, got to change the film out, you know what I mean? So, and who would want to come home and develop 40,000 photographs after,
I still have a ring around my right eye from the loop
Yeah,
holding
exactly.
it all those years. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, but will I go mirrorless? I don't know. I got a lot of friends that shoot them, that like them. It's that question you always get. People say, what's better, Canon or Nikon or Sony or this and that. And I don't, obviously I'm a Canon guy, and that's what I've shot since the moment I picked up a camera. And that was probably just a fluke, right? I was in a store and bought a Canon. So, and that's what I've stayed with. And they've been good to me, and I find their product reliable. I got a lot of friends that shoot Nikon, reliable Canon. Sony's doing some amazing things with their cameras. And so they're all out there. I'm glad to see kind of the megapixel war slowing down and then focusing on the actual processors and dynamic range, things that really enhance us as photographers. Because like I said, I don't think I need 97 million pixels. I don't know what size the card that's going to be. You get 2 photos on a 200 gig card. So and it really does. It slows down those big files. It makes your editing time a lot harder. I don't think it's really necessary. I think it picks up a lot of things we don't need.
There's a good tip about the underwater. I hadn't heard that and thought about all the particulate in the water, that if it's too high resolution, then you deal with that as well.
Exactly. What used to be just kind of blurred water now is pixelated out. And to go in there and remove that is quite a task. And that's the one thing with water when you're shooting under it. Sand, all these things that can drift through. On land, I have, especially with bears, if it's a warmer day, I'm going to have some bugs to deal with. As the months progress and it gets cooler, then you don't have that as much. When you're underwater, you have constant particulate coming by, and it can be crystal clear one minute, and then the next minute, something happens, something shifts in a wreck or something, some diver comes by, with his fins, and it just silts it up. He might be 6-8 feet off the ocean bottom, but when he kicks, and that force does come down, it stirs that sand up, and you have to wait quite a long time for that to settle down. It's one of the biggest things I teach in my diving workshops is your buoyancy. And what I find mostly with divers is the relatively cheap and mass availability of underwater imaging equipment, GoPros, things like that. People focus on, I want a camera underwater, not on, I want to be a good diver. Right, and I have an article I do for Dive Magazine. It's called The Ethical Shot, and it deals with ethics in photography, especially underwater, because what we get is you have a guy with a couple of little mug sticks, these metal tools we use, and he's holding a pygmy seahorse for another guy to take a picture of. There's a reason a pygmy seahorse turns when you take its picture. It doesn't have eyelids. And so a flash obviously affects it, right? So it's going to turn away from you. So the most effective tool with that, when me and you would be on opposite sides of this animal, you turn your strobes down, face them outward, right? And you set up your camera so it's not bright. And then when he turns the other way, you can get an image of him, and then he naturally turns my way. And then we leave. We take limited photos. I see people under there, bang, 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 with these huge strobes for, half hour trying to get this picture. And then they want to touch stuff. They want to move it because the idea is, well, I traveled all this way to Indonesia. If I don't get this picture of a pygmy seahorse for my Facebook page, then people aren't going to believe I was actually there or actually saw it. And so I always try to talk to people touching animals. I see it all the time. So many people have asked me this week, hey man, did you pet that bear? And I'm always like,
seriously,
no. Yeah. I mean, it's no, I don't pet the animal because I don't want my smell on it. If the animal chooses to come up to me, which this particular cub does, she rubs on me all the time, sits next to me. I've spent 2 seasons now with these 3 cubs up there in Katmai. It's amazing, man. But I don't touch the animal. I set a proper distance away. I've been shooting this bear with a 24 millimeter lens is how close she gets to me. She's got 2 siblings. And sometime last year, her mom just would come up on this gravel bar at the edge of the river and the lake. She would leave a couple of them. Generally, boars won't approach humans. And so she wants to fish because she's got these 3 cubs that are constantly taking her salmon. So she just left them on the beach with me, and she would get further and further away to the point where sometimes she was 300 or 400 yards. A lot of the guides, the fishing guides, were like, wow, I can't believe this. But out of the 3 cubs, there was one who figured out that her siblings would get 50 feet from me. And if she was the smallest, so she took the salmon and sat next to me, they wouldn't come over and get it, right? So, I mean, it's easy to reach out. It's almost surreal, I've spent these 2 summers, and this year they're back, and they're a little bigger, a little fatter. And she comes up and just sits with me. And to me, it's like, yeah, I want to pet her. I want to take her home. But it's just, it's not logical, right? It's nature. So you have to, again, I always tell people I let the animal dictate the encounter, but I never encroach on it. Even with those bears, I always am certain that they have an escape route that mom can get to them. I'm never between them. And I'm always aware of where other bears are, because you have to think that blocks those potential escape routes, right? So I'm constantly looking around going, hey, I don't want her to be threatened. And if she is threatened, she needs to have an avenue of escape. And it's my responsibility to make sure that exists.
Greg, I think there's something else that could be going on here.
What's
You're
that?
you're 6'6",
Yep.
250, so you're pretty well almost the size of a mature boar. Has she left salmon at your feet or a box of chocolates with the cubs or anything like that? You might want to watch for this.
Right,
These little hints.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, what an experience! No kidding.
That's in reference. So anybody listening, if you go to Greg's Instagram, that's the video that you were talking about, right? So it's a video of you that starts out, but then you scroll through and then you see pictures of this cub, right?
Exactly. Yep. And yeah, that's him. He's pretty cool, man. The Discovery Channel just had him on. They did a Halloween thing, Care Bear to scare Bear when she's eating her salmon. And again, that's what I was talking about earlier. When you get these multiple exposures, right? As she's such a gentle thing, but sometimes she looks fierce as she's chewing through this salmon. They're just cool. And there's two sets of them. The other mother, the other sow, this is her third set of cubs I've seen her with, and she has three. And she's old, right? And she's just kind of like at the I'm over it stage. And her cubs, they're quite rowdy. These three little ones she has, and that's the ones I set up. Aquatica made me this housing this year so I can be 150 feet away and have a remote to see what the camera's doing and expose the pictures. So I sat this housing up. Our idea was put it underwater, and we did a lot of work with that, right? But I found putting it on land, just sitting it there, bears are naturally curious. And so now Blake, who owns Aquatica, I tell him I can put a bear-proof commercial out because this bear is grabbing the housing, she's dragging it along. The cubs are naturally want to play with stuff. But I got some really great images because this natural curiosity, and they hear the shutter exposing, and they're looking in the dome port. I got a tongue going across it, licking the dome port. Had a lot of fun. But these three particular spring cubs, man, they were wild, and they got to the point where they were so comfortable with me. I was in the river one day, and they came out, and the water was too deep, so they started drifting. So I recognized this. You never want to really walk backwards or retreat from a bear. So I kind of sat there, and as the cubs were coming down, I had to kind of move because they drifted right by me. But all three of them were kind of just looking at me like, hey, we're drifting by. Like, is this gonna be all right? And again, it was a really cool scenario. But that particular mom, I've never had a sow get that close to me, and she would come up, and I'd be laying on my stomach taking photos, and she would come up and lay, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 feet away from me and kind of just look at me. But she never did any body language that I threatened her. She was almost just like, man, just over it. And heading into winter with three cubs like that, I worried because they weren't very fat. She was very skinny, and it's a long winter to survive. So whether she'll be there next year or not, yet to be seen. There was a mom there last year with four cubs, which is really hard. She's got to consume about 150 pounds of salmon a day. You got four cubs trying to take those from her, and then they're trying to breastfeed. And she did not return this year. So I would probably believe that her cubs probably died over the winter at some point. It is nature. They don't all make it, but super cool nonetheless. And I try to also explain to people that Katmai is unique in the world. Please don't go to Yellowstone and think you're going to have these animals be that calm and that close to you. They are very aware of humans in that region. They've been protected for years, and so they're simply there to eat. Like most animals, if you're not doing something stupid and you're staying out of their way, they're there for the salmon. We're definitely not on their menu. People always bring up Timothy Treadwell and the unfortunate tragedy that happened to him. It's a very different situation. If you get into late October, early November, food gets scarce. And here's a bear looking at a deer that can run 40 miles an hour, and me that can run 4. You're much easier opportunity. It's very rare, that people are harmed, even down in the ABC Islands. It's just really common sense. And Katmai is unique, and if you haven't been there to shoot, I would definitely recommend it. I know a guy that puts on some workshops, so I'd probably get you hooked up.
Well, what I was going to say to that was I think it is really important that you go with a guide like yourself or Drew or somebody. I'm pretty comfortable around bears, but I always love when Drew's there or somebody that is familiar with those particular bears because they know the behavior. And it's just like you were saying, you've followed these same bears for so many years, and you just know it's pretty safe. This bear here is a safe bear. This bear is not going to cause any problems. Yeah, they might look at you when they float by, but that's about it. There's nothing aggressive at all.
Exactly. Yeah, I want to shoot with Drew. I want to get up and go with him because he's amazing. From what I heard, I've not gotten the opportunity to shoot with him yet, but yeah, you need people that know the lay of the land and like you said, are familiar with the bears. I mean, there are just things I always tell people all the time. No matter where I go, if I'm going someplace for the first time, I do an extensive amount of research and go with someone that knows what they're doing and knows the land because just you're used to time, right? To go out and just bebop around and hope that you're going to be in the right place or where the animals are at. Got a very good friend, Jaylene, runs an operation, as you know, Jaylene's Alaska. Amazing young lady. If you ever want to do a story on whales, she's up there all the time. That's exclusively what she photographs. She grew up, her father owned a whale watching company, Harvey Mars. And so she grew up on the water. She grew up with these whales. She knows them by their fluke. Hey, this is Sasha. This is Sasha's calf. This is Flame. This is Flame's calf, and it's Sasha Flame. And then they have Bunsen now, and she's just super knowledgeable, right? And so to pay her the couple $100 she wants to take you out, you know, night and day. You just rent a boat or a captain that doesn't know anything about whale watching, where to place you. She's a photographer, so she knows I need the sun behind me, right? I don't want a silhouette of a whale tail, or maybe I do. But generally, I want the sun on one side of me, right? I don't want to spend 6 of my 8 hours looking for whales. They're generally feeding in the same place. She knows where those migratory patterns are for the orca. She knows where whales are feeding. She knows where the salmon fry is going to be. It's this time of year, right? They're going to be feeding on herring. They're going to be bubble net feeding. She knows all these things. So to pay a professional that is reputable and specializes in small boat photography tours is ideal because you can go up there and you make the best use of that time. If you're coming off a cruise ship and you only got a few hours and you're never going to be back to Juneau again, or if you're a hardcore wildlife photographer that does it professionally, if you have limited time and you want those best resources, those are the people you seek out because it just makes sense. You don't want to be on a whale boat with 150 people trying to get a shot from an elevated position of a whale's tail. You want to be low in the water. You want to have that. You want people to know you're in Alaska. So when you're composing that shot, hey, here's some mountains, here's some trees, here's some snow caps. It's something that looks Alaskan. If you're just shooting down at a whale from a third-story boat, or a cruise ship, you're not going to get that same kind of image. It's not going to tell that story.
You want to be on a Northwoods boat, isn't that right?
Yeah. Yep.
The one that's going to be delivered next year, right?
Yeah, exactly. North River boat.
North River, that's right, North River.
Yep, they're in Oregon. Call them up. Yeah, there is. I mean, there are boats that are good for photography, specific things. The windows that open in, so my photographers can be low to the water, have the rib, supply a bag so they can set their long lens on there. Because you're not going to be on a monopod or a tripod on a boat. It's just not realistic. Even with the best gimbal setup, you're constantly pitching and rolling. You have to have control of that lens. And to be low level like that, you're not dealing with the reflection light off the water. You're getting the animal, you're being able to compose it in a way that looks cool. And it's just nice, and I had the manufactured so the windows open in. It seats 22 people, but we only have 10 photographers, and it's 43 feet with 3 outboards, and you can shoot on the bow or the stern of the vessel as well. It's going to be pretty cool. I'm excited about it. But Juneau's a nice place, man. You want to shoot whales, you want to get bears, you want to get a good variety. Southeast Alaska is nice. It's very different from the other parts of Alaska. Cool nonetheless. And it's got some great scuba diving. And no one goes there to dive. Everybody's like, oh, it's cold. I'm like, it's not that cold, man. You can put a 7 mil, dump some hot water down it, you're good for 45 minutes.
Ay.
I can't not mention, I'm a product of the 80s. And
Okay.
I know you got your start as an artist.
I did.
And I cannot overlook the fact that you started out by doing airbrushing of jean jackets.
I did. As a 3, and I don't know if other people do. Sometimes they don't follow my other page. I'm also a tattoo artist. That's what I do when I'm not out doing photography. I grew up around motorcycles and hair bands, all that. And so I spent my entire high school career painting Eddie from every Iron Maiden album cover to Def Leppard to all, the album artwork was it when we were in that age, right? I mean, it was always like you waited for the album to come out. In fact, the other day I was tattooing this gentleman, and over here behind me I have a stack of original Kiss albums from double platinum, both the Alive albums, the Destroyer albums, the Japanese versions. He brought that for a tip, all pristine. The album's still in the sleeve, still have the posters. And I remember being a kid, right? And Kiss Alive 2 came out, and taking that poster and unfolding it, putting it on my wall, and then my mom going nuts because it was the devil. But it was cool, man. I always did that. That's how I earned money in school, painting, airbrushing jean jackets. You remember them, man, the Levi jean jacket, perfectly suited for a little bottle of Mad Dog 2020 in the inside pocket. See, he gets it. He remembers.
I was there. I had one, and I went to those concerts, man. So I totally get it.
They're getting crazy money for those these days, man. I see them on eBay and Etsy. These people painting jean jackets, getting maybe I ought to get back into it. If photography fails, tattooing, then maybe that's where I'll go. I just circle back around,
Right.
But it's funny because when I work, I listen to I'm a big hair band guy. I'm a drummer as well. I'm not very good, so don't ask me to play, but it's just something I love doing, right? And a couple years ago, I went out and bought a drum set. My girlfriend's like, "Are you nuts?" I'm like, "No, man. I got YouTube. Like, I'll learn to play, right? And I have a good time doing it. I'm probably not going to see me on the Grammys anytime soon. But I'm always jamming to those old hair bands. Last year, Brian Hitt is the drummer for Mario Speedwagon. He's a friend of mine, and so we were always going backstage with all the bands that they tour with. And my girlfriend's she's significantly younger than me. In fact, she was born the year I graduated. But she likes those same bands. So we hang out and we're backstage with Def Leppard and those guys and some of the guys in the bands. And it's awesome. It's just something I dig. And it's part of my childhood. And personally, they haven't made good music since those days ended. So
it was funny. I actually just saw Def Leppard in concert about 4 or 5 years ago. And the fact that they're still touring and they actually sound really good is pretty impressive to me. But
what's crazy, you're backstage, right? And it used to be, a party. Now it's smart water and it's broccoli and it's organic food, which is awesome. But I'm like, my girlfriend's all excited. She's like, "Oh, I can't believe we're going backstage," right? And I'm like, "Calm down. It's not what it used to be." But, got these guys, man, 60 some years old. We went and saw Bob Seger. He's 76, and he's out there. He's still playing 2.5-hour show, man. Like you listen to one of his albums. So hats off, And they're finally making some real money doing it with what concert tickets cost these days.
Great.
Yeah. Then the only other thing I had for you was I just wanted to compliment you on your Instagram, and I think you've got a good formula. I really do. I love. And it's a kind of convenience thing. It's hard to have somebody there to be able to get some videos of you doing your thing. But anytime you can, that's a pretty neat opportunity. And I think I even made a comment on a post recently, but it's really neat to be able to see you in action doing your thing and then to see the product that you got while you're doing it. The other thing I wanted to just ask you is, and I don't want to ask you on the air because I don't think it'll be good for everybody else to hear, but I will be asking you for your girlfriend's name and number, and not for the reasons you're thinking. I'm pretty forward about this, right? But no, I'm just kidding. But it is good to have somebody that knows those algorithms and that. And I'll tell you what, that's got to be priceless. I mean, holy cow!
And I actually stole her away and had her start her own company to do just that. There's some of my sponsors, companies I work with. She's taken over their Instagram accounts. Because it really is, man. It's a full-time gig, right? And if you're not on top of every day being on there and finding out, hey, what's trending? How does this work? What's new? What are we missing out on? And they constantly put out updates. I don't know where you find those updates. I don't have that kind of time to sit around. So I personally do my page. She gives me tips sometimes, and sometimes we'll kind of butt heads a little bit about stuff. But she's actually the one that took up. She came up to Katmai for a week. She had never been with the bears up there. And so she took a lot of that footage of me working, and it turned out to be quite nice and something I'm gonna have a constant presence on. Maybe not her all the time. She doesn't get to travel like I do, but she learned very quickly. And I tell her this all the time. I'm like, "Hey, babe, when the sun comes up, I'm out. I don't come back until the sun goes down. I got some shots of the bears. The sun's going down. The bears. I said you have to be there to get the moment. And people call it whale watching. I call it whale waiting. It's the same with bears. We'll be at I tell her in the afternoon at Pack Creek, especially July, August, sun comes up. Bears don't want to be out in that, so from noon to 4 or 5, nothing's going on. Some of the subadult bears are coming out doing their thing, but the big guys come out in the prime time when they're not in that kind of heat. Last year, Alaska had some unprecedented heat, but for her, sometimes I think she thinks that it's a little more glamorous than it is, and I think a lot of people feel that way. I have a lot of clients that come out and sometimes will have to, they want to go back early or this and that. And I try to tell them that, hey, when we come out and shoot, I'm out there for a full day, especially in Katmai places like that. I'm like, you have to be able to carry your gear. We don't have porters, things like that. So if you have a couple long lenses and you want to bring them, call up F-Stop, another great company, makes the best backpacks. I'm telling you, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they make awesome equipment, man. I mean, I can put a 600 and then my 2 to 400 on a body, put it on there, comfortably carry it around. Rugged, waterproof. It's good because it's usually raining in Alaska. That's pretty synonymous with Alaska is rain, which is another good thing too. The overcast is great. This year was really sunny. It's harder. I prefer that even overcast. It's like that nice flat diffuser. It's nice to have it.
I think you bring up a great point, is that we're there for a good time, not a long time. And these people who go on workshops, they have that week, they have that 5 days, whatever the workshop duration is. If they're just prepared ahead of time to be out there at all opportunities, you never know when the magic moment happens. And so
Yeah.
they have to stick it out, be patient and weather it. And if it's quiet, man, what better place to sit and look at the scenery, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was in Svalbard last year with a good friend of mine, Roy, that owns Wild Photo Travel, another great guy, great photographer. And it's the same thing, right? You're looking for polar bears. He can't make polar bears appear. We're up there for 3 weeks and, you're looking at ice all day with binoculars from the bridge trying to find it. And when it happens, it's 3 a.m. Boom, man. He's knocking on your door. Hey, there's a bear. Maybe, I think there's 2 or 3 of us, a couple guys, went out and shot. The rest of people were like, "Oh, I'm staying in." We're out there for 8 hours, man. 8 hours on these Zodiacs, right? In fact, the one gentleman, perfect English couple. She is actually a lady in waiting for the Queen of England. That was her career. I didn't know this, but there's several of them. And she was bred from birth to do this, right? Went to proper schools. She sat up at dinner. She was amazing. She would bring us out tea and biscuits. On that day, she brought us out ginger biscuits and tea. We're following this male who was hunting a reindeer, right? And so this polar bear, as the climate changes, I don't know if we got time for this story, but I always see these people will tell you, "Oh man, there's polar bears starving to death." That's not true. You see these photos, you see them in trash dumps. Polar bears live generally 24 to 25 years. That lifespan is dictated by their canine teeth. When they lose their canine teeth, they lose their ability to hunt. Same as a wolf, if it loses its canine teeth, it generally starves to death. So polar bears, we're seeing, they've only been protected in the Svalbard and Arctic regions for 25 years. Canada is still the only country that still hunts them. Being that that's their lifespan, for the first time ever, we're seeing them starve to death, right? When you see them draped in skin, it's not an argument of climate change. It's simply that the animal is starving because it's lost its canine teeth. And previously it's been hunted, and so it never made it to that age, right? And but one of the things they're eating now is reindeer, because the reindeer are staying close to the water. They're staying closer to the water because they're getting less snow, more rain. It freezes. A reindeer can't walk on it, nor can it eat grass through ice. In fact, a lot of the reindeer are having their teeth broken out. They're slipping and falling off cliffs. And so it's one of the things that the polar bear has put on its menu. But to see him hunt that is amazing because he's patient, right? In this 8-hour period, he's chasing this reindeer. And he's not chasing it like running after it. He's just following it. It gets in the water, it goes to an island. Water is the ideal place a polar bear wants it because it can swim at 4 knots. Reindeer can't swim like that. So he basically wore the animal down, gets it to the water so he can make his kill, which was amazing. But the moral of that story, and back to your question, is that happened at 3 a.m. That's when they found that bear. And so if you're on your, if you're in bed, you get up and you go, and you stay out in those conditions, and it's freezing cold and the wind's blowing in your face. To me, I don't even notice all that, right? It's just part of it. It's the awesomeness of being out there in this vast open space, and here you are with this polar bear. It's not at your zoo. It's not at there's places, of course, you can go in Canada and stuff and take tours and find them, but they're not out in their natural hunting environment on the ice doing what they do. And to find them like that is amazing. But I was shocked that people would pay so much to go on these trips, and then when it happens, you're like, "Oh, I'm sleeping."
Exactly.
Yeah, you can sleep it.
Gotta live this life, man.
Right. It is, but
People.
that's life out in the wild, like you said, and it's. I agree. Take advantage if you're going on these tours. Take advantage of them. Spend your time out there shooting pictures.
That's a cool story.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a good experience, man. Svalbard.
I want that. I'm up at 3 a.m. for that.
All right. I would think, man, anybody would be up.
Yeah, right.
For
I'm sure
bear encounter like that.
99% of our listening audience would be up at 3 a.m. for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
No, but it's good. It's a good place to shoot. If you ever get the chance to go to Svalbard, I would recommend it, especially in the autumn, because you get the light, right? In the middle of summer, June, July, You're not getting any nice yellow light. You know, when you get that time of the year, see a couple of my pictures on Instagram, we got that low light that kind of circles around for several hours in the middle of the night. And that's the time you want to be out there shooting, right? Because having that color in a place that doesn't get any color, to me, is kind of amazing. And it's kind of the shoulder seasons of when they work up there. And to me, that's some of the best times. Just like Antarctica, you know, the early season is when to go before they're all dirty and stuff like that. But, you know, before the crowds of huge cruise ships get there.
We can make this a 4-hour podcast, my friend.
I know, man.
I love the stories.
When we're not live.
This is the next best thing to being in the field. It's just hearing other stories and adventures like this, and from the nudibranchs to the polar bears, I mean, to Alaska. So I'm wondering, after you have the likely amazing adventure to Kamchatka, can we have you back on to hear about that Russian adventure?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to come back on anytime, man. It's been a joy. It's a privilege, and I'm honored that you guys even asked me to be on. So it's been a blast. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Tell us one more time, what is your website you said that was under construction that you're going to put on, or that's going to be up here shortly with all your tours on it?
It will be, you'll be able to go through it right through gregpiperart.com, but It will be Alaska Photo Travel. It's going to be the new parent company and website. It's grown a little bigger than I had originally anticipated or thought, which is good. So we're going to do that. And it's going to also have some links to some of my friends that give different tours, different places, different times of year. Because like I said, I still, to this day, next year, I'm taking a tour with a guide and a photographer. Just simply what we talked about earlier. There are people out there doing things that I'm interested in, and I find the best way to do those is to go with them. Yeah, it's so you can just go to gregpiperart.com or alaskaphototravel.com and follow both of us on Instagram. And yeah, keep up with where we're going, what we're doing.
What we'll do is we'll put all that stuff in the show notes so that nobody has to remember that. Just go to the page and I'll have all the links that you talked about. Even like you said, it was Jaylene's Alaska?
Yeah, Jaylene's Alaska. She's a great friend of mine. You look her up on Instagram as well. If you want to get a nice small boat tour out of Juneau, be sure to look her up. She's everything. She looks at Alaska like I do. I mean, I love it, right? And there are people that work there and they like it and they're seasonal. She lives there year round. She just embraces everything that in my mind I find to be Alaskan. She's conservative minded. She cares about the whales. She'll give you an ethical expedition as well as awesome photographs. And she's knowledgeable about camera systems and how to take a picture of a whale. And you'll see her all the time with her captain window open, shooting shots out there. In fact, just the other day, I came out, I had limited time. I had friends there. You hit her up on a text and I said, hey, where's the whale action? And in a lot of industries, man, people would tell you, oh, it's down, it's that way when it's this way, because they want, but they're not like that up there. She's like, oh, they're over here behind Shelter Island. They're over here in Eagle Reef and they're feeding and they're lunch. And I came around and boom, that's when we got that video of the breach. But yeah, she's a small operation, all female operation. And her and her husband are both great people. They're just true Alaskans. And, I like to see them being successful and her tours are pretty good. So if you get up there and you want to do it, and if you want to fish, you got people that can take you fishing too. But if you're a photographer and you're serious about taking some pictures of whales, look up Jaylene. She's got smaller boats. People who know photography understand you want to be close to the water. You want to be, bounce around a little bit more in a smaller boat. But you go out there with these big mega whale watching boats, man, with a couple hundred people on them, and it's no good. You're not going to get any good results, and you're not going to get any time with the animal. It's kind of like check the box. Hey, we saw some sea lions. We're moving over here. So. And besides the whales, man, there's incredible eagle action. And I'll actually be heading back to Alaska in a couple of weeks after I get home from Belize because the last salmon run up in Haines and the eagles that'll be up there, man. It's a great time of year to be shooting bald eagles up there.
Your schedule is amazing.
It's hard to complain about it, man. I tell people all the time, it's like advice I give kids when I'm talking in schools and stuff. It's we have such huge emphasis on money and quantity, and I try to really tell people, make it about quality of life. I've had the privilege, right, a blessed life of getting up every day and never having to go to work, and that's through my tattooing and my photography. It's just cool. I tell them all the time, man, follow what you love and then figure out a way to make a living at it. I see people every day get up and go to the grind, and they're like, "Oh, you're so lucky." I'm like, I'm blessed, but I set my life up the way I want to live it. You know what I mean? I think more people should focus on who we are and how we want to live rather than having 2 BMWs in a 10,000 square foot house. But that's me. I don't know. So I would rather be out there year round than be the guy coming out for 7 days, busy on his iPhone, texting his work or whatever, man, and instead of enjoying where they're at. So
I wish I'd have been able to listen to one of your workshops or one of your speeches when I was a kid. Let me put it that way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I try to inspire him to do something cool. I mean, I guess it's all about perspective and what you want, man. What makes you happy. For me, it's being out there, even in my other job, like I said, tattooing. You get up every day, you do it. I feel blessed to be able. I go there, man. I put on playlists of hair band songs, and I'm singing. I tell people that's the only thing that's free at my tattoo shop is my singing. Walk out, man. You got to keep it in perspective, right? To be able to make a living doing what you love, having people that are willing to pay you for your time, and keep that in check, that ego, be humble and thankful all the time, man, that we get the opportunity to do these things, because it's an amazing world out there, man. And I tell people every day, make it epic. My daughter, she turned 16. I gave her a blank notebook, this leather-bound notebook, and a pen. And I told her in her birthday card letter, I said, this is it. You've grown up. I've done all I can to prepare you for life. She's actually getting ready to go to medical school. It's in her last year of undergrad. But I told her, I said, this is a blank notebook, right? Here's a pen. Use this pen to write the most important story ever told, and that's going to be yours. So, man, I get choked up. I'm sentimental about the kids, but that's truly what I wish for them, man, is that they'll go out there and live an amazing, epic life. Get off the couch, man. If you get an opportunity, seize it. So many people get chances put in front of them, and they let them slide, man. Take that trip, spend that weekend someplace, go do something epic. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things to do and see. We got this, even, right in your backyard, man. People don't, there's so much cool stuff out there in nature and outside. Camera's just one way to get out, one motivating factor to get you out there, enjoying it. So, and hopefully that leads to a bunch of other stuff that people like.
I like that. Keep it epic. That's a t-shirt. That's a tattoo.
All right, we'll do that. We'll tattoo it on you. That'll be the next podcast.
I think we ought to let Greg take us out and give us his little saying there.
Yeah.
Right on. Pick your tune. Yeah.
It's cool. People things should be epic. I got a buddy down in Cayman. His dive company's called Epic Diving, Pete, and I tell that's how I close every post, as on Instagram. Make it epic. Be kind. Be adventurous. Be bold. Live a life that's epic. Because tomorrow, man, I'm telling you, if this epidemic's taught us anything, nothing's guaranteed, man. It wasn't long ago. I had a good friend. Her husband went to pick up a pizza on a Saturday afternoon. Boom, hit by a car. Done. You don't know, right? So get out there and enjoy it. Take it all in, man. Take those chances. It's you don't want to sit around at the end with any regrets. At least I don't. You want a lot of good stories. Me and my dad have a discussion all the time. He says every penny he makes. I told him, I said, it's cool, man. When you die, I'm taking my third and I'm going to party with it. But maybe not all the time. Maybe you should go have a little fun, go out and spend some of it, have a good time. Finally taking them to Alaska next year to do some fishing and see some bears. So that'll be good. But a lot of people do it, man. They work the grind their whole life and they don't ever get out there and take advantage of the opportunities.
Well, they work the grind and then they put away the best part of their life, the most healthy, the most vivacious part of their life. And they're just, they wait till the end and then they can't get around. They can't go do the stuff and they still have fun, but it's not the same. It's just not the same.
I agree 100%. And, I'm going to run for president. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the whole Social Security system, right? You will get your check from 18 to 38, and then you can promise the government that you'll actually work till you're dead. Right, but not this way where they promise us and then they spend it and we get old and find out we ain't got nothing left. Right, you got to work in Walmart till you're 75. No, I want my time and my government check up front, right? And I'll promise you I'll work later. I think it's a good theory, man. I think it'd be a sound platform to run on.
I'm voting for you. I'm gonna do you in on the write-in ballot right now, just in my vote this year.
That'll be my slogan. Vote epic, right?
Oh, you are awesome. We're definitely going to have you on again. We all spent a lot of time in Alaska, so maybe we can meet up there one of these days too.
Let's do that, man. Let's do that. Yeah, that'd be epic.
We'll get your schedule offline and then Drew too. I didn't know that you've never been out with Drew, so
never shot with Drew, and I want to. I met him through the advocacy for the Pebble Mine.
Yep.
And we had this whole plan to have a calendar made up this year, but COVID put the kibosh on that my companies were going to print, we're going to distribute throughout Alaska to sell at different lodges and stuff like that to raise money for the fight. Like I said, I'm hopeful. I tell him all the time, man. The amount of work he does can't be understated. If the Pebble Mine fails, he will be the person they should give the award to, because he's done more for that area, and he understands what's at stake. And I get up there and I look, and I'm in disbelief that they would even consider doing that kind of mining anywhere in that area. I mean, just the amount of jobs, the economic impact, the idea that you would just destroy something like that is that important to the environment, and not just bear viewing and things like that, but it's just pristine, man. And can't we have one place we keep like that? I was telling you that story about that manta ray in Raja Ampat. That the area of Raja Ampat used to be amazing, and one of the big reasons I've stopped writing for dive publications is because they promote these places and they just get destroyed, right? It's like press. And Raja Ampat went from, in 2008, from having a dozen liveaboard vessels to 285 liveaboard vessels today, right? Everyone's diving there. You get these new money economies, I call them, that come and they want to grab the coral. They think because they have money and they got nice things that they can go in. And I try to tell them, man, if everybody busts off a piece of coral and there's thousands of you diving, man, it just doesn't sustain, And so that's the unfortunate part about a lot of the dive industry, or diving. You find these great pristine places, and it's cool to not tell anybody. You don't want to write about them. And some of my favorite diving is just the exploratory trips. I was supposed to do that this October over in Indonesia, where you just go and you plot a course and you're just like, hey, let's dive here. It's not a known dive site. And you get in, sometimes it's and then sometimes it's awesome. But I don't ever have a dive that I've ever went on where I came up and I was like, oh, that sucks, because I just feel like it's all amazing. There's a lot of emerging places out there that haven't been found. The problem is when you find them, you get the press, and then with the press, sometimes Antarctica is a great example of something that needs to be preserved, something they need to put the brakes on, in my opinion, because you're starting to build. I know these big cruise lines, Carnival and stuff, have under construction ice-breaking vessels, and the last thing you need is a freaking Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville in your next port of call in Antarctica. You know what I'm saying? Here comes a penguin or something like that. It's that's kind of what it turns into, man. And that's the downside of what we do, and I have some culpability in that and some responsibility in it as well, because you take these photos, you show people these amazing places, and sometimes that leads to those places not being so amazing. So it's great to see the work that Drew's doing. It's great what they do in Alaska. They keep these places pristine. They have limited amount of people that can go to places like McNeil River, that can go to Pat Creek, that can go to Katmai. The lottery system's good. You can get in there. But yeah, there's things we have to do along the way to conserve these places. And hopefully, man, the Pebble Mine, I like it's getting press. I talk to people, they're like, they know what it is, right? Even people down around here in the lower 48, they're familiar with it. The message is getting out there. And hats off to Drew, and because he's really done all the legwork. The rest of us contribute photos, we put on posts, we do our part. I wrote extensively about it for Discovery. A lot of it got abbreviated, as happens in articles. So it's limited with words and things like that. But Fat Bear Week's been huge up in Katmai. It's getting people involved, and hey, man, they're following these bears on the webcams and stuff. We just put in LiDAR a couple weeks ago in Brooks Falls. So it actually gives you the accurate weight of the bear. Little did they know they could have saved $4 million and just got a new iPhone 12, because that's boom, bear done. But what else would you do with $3 million grant, right? But yeah, they were up there installing them at the fall. So it'll be cool next year. You'll be able to see that. Anything to get people involved in the environment, get people involved in these things going on, man, and trying to understand that, these are really rare types of places, and they need to be protected. So again, hats off to Drew for doing that.
Yeah,
he's been since butt.
Yeah, he's awesome. You're awesome.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much, man. I appreciate you reaching out.
Thank you for your time.
You've been listening to the Wild and Exposed podcast. If you haven't yet, please give us a rating and a review, and make sure you're subscribed so that you'll get every episode we produce as soon as we drop it. And as always, thanks for tuning in.
We're gonna make it someday. Nothing's gonna get in